All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for joining again. This is our March SOAR Disability Ministry Network. And as we get others join, they'll just come on in. But let me just open us up in prayer, then we'll get going with everything. But let's pray. Heavenly Father, God, I just thank you so much for this day. Lord, we praise you for all that you do. God, thank you for the churches represented here, and just pray that you work through each and every one of them. Help them as they are trying to welcome families with disabilities. Help them be effective in doing that. Just pray that you bless our time together tonight. Help us be able to learn from one another, and just give us wisdom and discernment and trying to figure out how best to welcome families into our ministries. And God, just thank you for giving us this opportunity. I pray that you bless our families, and thank you for all that you do now. Pray this in your name. Amen. All right, just one quick reminder. We are recording this. We do put it up on our YouTube page and then on our Facebook page, our SOAR Disability Ministry Network page. So for those who aren't able to join us, they can catch it later. So saying that, if you've got something you want to talk about dealing especially with an individual in your ministry, we just ask that you don't use any names. You can use a different name or something, but don't use actual names for anyone. But we can describe what's going on, and then we can learn and help from each other. But we'll just start off. We're going to go around. I'm going to have each of you introduce yourself, give us your name, where you're at. We're all over the country here. And then what your role is. And why don't you tell us a little bit about your church or the ministry, and then we'll come back to it later. But why don't you let us know if there's any question or anything that you're trying to find out, or any problem you're trying to take care of that you want to make sure we address tonight. So with that, Rachel, let's start off with you. I've got you first on my screen. And you're muted right now.
Yes.
There you go.
Hi, good night, everyone. My name is Rachel Cayetano. I'm from Church of the Revelation in the Bronx. Our main pastors, Pastor Tim, Pastor Diana, Pastor Jasmine, Pastor Danny. And Pastor Jasmine is the pastor for our children's ministry. So we have, our ministry starts from babies, but we really haven't been doing babies since COVID, all the way up to our teenagers, actually young people. I think it goes to like early 20s if they want to. So we've been combining our classes. So I'm one of the leaders for the beginners and toddlers. So we do 2 to 6 years old. No, it's 3 and 4, 3 and 4 and 5 and 6. So it's 3 to 6 years old. So that's what we do. And we used to have it separated, the 2 and 3, and then the 5 and 6. So now we have, so now I'm sorry. I keep seeing 2, but we don't have 2 years old. We have 3 and 4 year old and 5 and 6. So we used to have the 3 and 4 separated, and then 5 and 6. But now we have them all together. So which, has its challenge. But at the same time, I think that the little ones, they start to move up to the 5 and 6 year old level, where they're like, oh, okay, I have to learn a little bit more, listen a little bit more. And so I'm very interested, especially when it comes to the 5 and 6 year olds, because we don't get as many 3 and 4 year olds. So 5 and 6 year old would be where sometimes they come in, and then we have a few kids every now and again. We get, even if they're not regular members, like that are like on the spectrum. Okay. Definitely could use help with that. Awesome.
Well, glad to have you with us, Rachel. I got to meet with their entire church, a lot of their team, Pastor Jasmine and 2 or 3 others. Fantastic team. Love all of them. About 3 weeks ago, and excited for everything you guys are working on, trying to get the ministry going to welcome families with disabilities. So that's awesome.
Thank you.
Colleen, welcome. Why don't you tell us about you and where you're at and what's going on?
Well, I'm on the spectrum and I have well, my whole family is on the autism spectrum. And I'm trying to start a ministry at my church that I'm going to. And I was really impacted by the conference we were at, the Behold conference, because that to me is my mission field, because I'm in contact, I'm in circles. Most of the people I know are in the disability community. It's not just autism, of course. So I really would like to see our church have a disability ministry, but I think that sometimes it's hard to start something. And they've only served like 1 or 2 families at a time. And I think there could be a lot of fear involved. And, you know, it's hard enough finding volunteers for, I'm in the children's ministry every Sunday anyway, but the good part was the ministry leader did start a sensory room and has another mother helping out with that, whose son is, it's another neurodivergent family. So I think it's a good step. But, you know, I think the fear is like volunteers and budget. So I totally understand that. But I still think I'm still very passionate about it. So I'm like, it can happen. You know, we can do this.
It absolutely can. So, and we'll address some of the things you talked about there too here tonight. We'll talk through some of that, but yeah, we're glad to have you. That can definitely be scary, but it can happen. No question there with that at all. So Angela, welcome. Why don't you tell everyone about you and your role?
Hi, yeah. I just got placed as the special needs ministry director. Our church, I'm from Vineyard Church in Kansas City, Missouri, and we have a population of about 500. I would say, well, I guess our seats can range from 500. Obviously, give or take per service. We have 3 services on Sundays. So we used to do Saturday evenings, but we decided to do 3 on Sunday instead of 2, and then to give some time for families, for staff on Saturdays. So I would say, also do a lot of events, a lot of kids social events. We do VBS and all of those things throughout the summers. I'm freshly new. I have been going to church there for a year, but I'm new to the staff. So I just kind of got on beginning of March. And so I'm just kind of trying to dive in. But in our kids ministry, we have ranging from babies to, which is, everything is starting to get overloaded, I will say. So we've got our babies, which is ranging from about 15 to 20 at this point. We've got kindergarten and first together, or we've got a 3 and 4-year-olds room, sorry. And then we've got kindergarten and first together, second and third together, fourth and fifth together. And those are all our Vineyard kids on Sunday mornings. We are trying to kind of, they dropped off the 6th graders kind of a little bit, which is, they're trying to bring it back up to where they have something, they're going to call it kind of like a pod in the normal service time, to where they can kind of all come together, but not be up in kids necessarily, because they're in that transition period. And so they're going to try to do that coming up, I think, within the next couple months. And then we have youth that is on Thursday nights. So currently I'm on staff to really support the preschool up to 5th grade currently. But looking at a lot of different things, you know, I've reached out to our youth minister. I've reached out to just a lot, because I was trying to express to my pastor, like, you don't grow out of special needs. So like this is going to grow, and it's going to grow very significantly, very quickly. And so, and I'm already aware of that. I just wanted them to be aware of that, because it's not just until 5th grade that this is going to be a need. And so they just kind of reassured me that, that they understand that, and that we are going to start small, because you have to start somewhere. And so I'm one of those, you know, big dreamers, big believers, and all these things. And so just trying to start small. I am creating a sensory room. So we do have a room put aside for that. And I have just started purchasing all the stuff. They're finishing up a small group in that room now this week. And then I will start creating the whole thing, putting it all together.
Cool.
So I'm super excited about that. We have pretty much all the resources we need for that. I just need to put it all together. And then that's probably the main thing. I'm going to start doing some disability ministry binders in each of the classrooms with just different tips, tricks, things like that. And then with all the kids on those Sundays of attend each service with like what their needs may be underneath. Just that's the teacher in me to be kind of organized with those binders. But so that's a little bit about me. I'm also a special ed teacher. So I have that background of I've done special ed resource elementary level for a couple of years. I've done middle school resource for a couple of years, co-taught a couple classes, and now I'm building their life skills program there. So I do have a lot of age range, and I did a lot of my practicums in a high school life skills level as well. So I do feel very knowledgeable about it, but I also, it can be very overwhelming just in the beginning because you don't know where to begin. And that's kind of where I'm at is I think I'm taking the correct steps, but I also would like some guidance as well. And what are the proper, things that I should be doing? We do a serve rally twice a year. And so actually this Sunday we have a serve rally. And so I got to speak at this last weekend service, all 3 of the service times, about the ministry launching. So that was really good for our church. And got about 20 volunteers. And so
Awesome.
we'll see how that, because we want to buddy them up in our ministry. So we'll kind of see where that goes, but I've already reached out, and then we have our serve rally this Sunday to see like who shows up, who kind of wants to know more, and then go from there of who we can pair up. But yeah, so I'm kind of at the like beginning stages where I feel like I'm doing the right things, but I also, it is overwhelming as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. So awesome. So, glad to have all of you here. Exciting things going on with all of you. So, all of you are kind of in the same ballpark here, with things, either, as in Colleen wanting to start something and trying to convince the church, where, the other 2 of you, you've already got the church bought in and say, yeah, we're going to do this. So that's the big difference. And you guys are taking what you already have and then trying to figure out how to welcome those families and then hopefully add in new families. Where Colleen is wanting to try to help her church see, well, you got my family, you might have another family or 2, want to be able to better serve these families and then grow it from there. So they both pretty much go hand in hand with that. So there's all kinds of things that we can talk through tonight. So first, let me just throw out and see, is there a specific question or topic that you guys want to make sure we address first, or I can just start talking? And again, this is wide open discussion. You guys can all jump in whenever you want. This is not the doc show. So any specific things that you guys would like us to address here, kind of starting off?
I personally have just really been thinking about training my volunteers, and just because that's a big piece of it. Like it's not just me. So, I have the knowledge already. I need to start training others into having that knowledge and knowing how to work with these kids because they will be the buddies.
Right.
So, basically training is kind of my thing. That's my next step, I feel like, because I'm kind of got all these like basic, foundational steps. But my next step would be to train all these people that are wanting to serve.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk about training real quick. That is a huge piece. First off, one of the big things I always say whenever I'm recruiting a volunteer to serve, I always say I've got one requirement for them to be able to serve and be a buddy. And it's a simple question. Can you be a friend? I don't ask if they've got experience with special needs. I don't ask if they understand autism, none of those things, because they don't need it. They just need to be willing to be a friend. That's all it takes. It's relational. Disability ministry is a completely relational ministry. Angela nailed it on the head earlier. The very important thing is that no one should ever age out of your ministry. So, if you are just working in preschool and taking care of individuals with special needs, you should be able to make sure that once they're out of preschool and in elementary, you're able to take care of them then. And when they move on to middle school and then high school, and once they graduate high school and college or adults, you're constantly going to be able to take care of them. And a disability ministry is unlike any other ministry in the church. First off, you're not just serving the individual with special needs, you're serving the entire family. You're serving the parent, you're serving the other siblings, the other kids. And so it's everybody. And it's also the only ministry that goes and touches every single ministry in the church. So all of your jobs, in your roles, whether you're formally on staff or you're a volunteer, is to help educate staff as well about individuals with special needs and what they need, and just help bring that awareness. I love what Angela was saying, that she helped, talk to the pastor and let him know some of the things going on and how important this is. We have to constantly be doing that. But after you get someone to say, hey, we're going to volunteer, you have to train them. And I always say, again, you don't need any experience, because that's where the training comes in. Training is my bread and butter. That's my specialty. That's one thing that I've come in and I've figured out something that works incredibly well with training. So I'll kind of explain my training and what works with that. And again, the important thing is that you do training. I highly recommend, for this to be the most successful possible, that you don't just train the buddies, the individuals who are going to be the volunteers. You train all of the children's ministry volunteers, if you convince the children's ministry to do that. That you can train all of the student ministry volunteers. That you can also train all of the welcoming team, the parking lot attendants, the security, anyone who comes in contact with someone on the first time basis, because everyone needs to know this. And I was a children's pastor for a while as well. And I can speak as a children's pastor, the training I had as a children's pastor to serve in my children's ministry, I never once talked about behaviors. All my training was talking about all the things they had to know, never be left one-on-one. Here's the fire escape. Here's what happens. We live in the Midwest. So here's what happens if there's a tornado, so on and so forth. And, check in, check out, bathroom policies, all the policies that we had to go through, which is all important, but no one's trained on how to deal with behavior. Anyone can have behavior, not just individuals with special needs. So that's why it's so important. And at the same time, if we can get everyone trained, they then know what to expect and how to work with it. So what I did, I originally, the first time I've been doing this now for 15 years. The first time I did it, I had actually one of the lead teachers for a very large school district here in the greater Kansas City area. She was in charge of training all the special ed teachers. And so she helped me write the training. I thought it was amazing. I'm like, oh, this is the best we could ever do. We did the training one Sunday. The very next week, I'm walking down the hallway. I see one of our volunteers who went through the training, a behavior going on, and they're a deer in the headlight. Didn't know what to do. I jumped in, took care of the behavior, and I'm like, time out. What happened? I talked to the volunteer later, and she said, I just couldn't remember what to do. I'm so sorry. So what did that tell me about my training? My training wasn't effective. And so you can have all the great knowledge, but if you can't put it in a way that your volunteers are going to be able to apply, it's not worth anything. So you guys may not know my background. I'm actually a physician. I'm a pediatrician working at pediatric ER. So my background with medicine, the way we teach anything in medicine, and I was a chief resident. I oversaw all the residents. The way we teach medicine is through case studies and giving examples where we work through that. And so there's an old saying, and I want you to remember this: see one, do one, teach one. And that's the way you can really learn. So I encourage you for your training to see it. So after that, that's what I did. I ripped apart all of that training. I threw it in the trash can, and I took the basics, and then now I've split it in half. I've got the first part of my training. I go over some of the basics, but then I created 10 case scenarios that you would see on a weekend. And then I have all the volunteers work through it and tell me how they would handle that situation. I'm not sitting there just giving them the answers. They have to tell me, and we work through it. Well, guess what? They now just did one. They saw one, and they're experienced to that. So then the next week, when they see that exact thing, well, they've already remember how to do it. It sticks in their mind. Everyone learns differently, and that really will help them learn. Now, all of a sudden, they're going to be able to apply that and do it. And then after they see it and do it in real life, next time they're going to be able to help teach someone else to really set it up. So that's one thing that I've done that's really been successful that I encourage everyone else to do. And that's something, and Angela, we can talk later about that. That's something I can help you all with that as well. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel on all of that. But important thing with training that we forget all too often is frequently we train one time when they first start, and then we stop. We don't train again. Training needs to be ongoing. I highly recommend that you have to have at least an annual training to help keep things fresh. I recommend having a quarterly training, at least a biannual training. But here's the trick: don't ever call them training. If you call it a training, your volunteers aren't going to come to it, because they're like, oh, I already did training when I first started. I don't need training again. So your goal as a ministry leader should be to create community with your volunteers and kind of create a family. So I came up with a different idea. I call them gatherings. I call them buddy gatherings, because I name all of our volunteers are called buddies with them. You can figure out whatever you want, but a buddy gathering. Nowhere with that does it sound like training. And I plan the entire night around a certain topic that we're going to train on. So, for instance, something I might do a little extra training on might be how to deal with a nonverbal child. There's all kinds of things you can talk about. A lot of people think, well, I can't communicate with a nonverbal child. No, yes, you can. You can ask them yes, no answers, and then say yes or no, and have them point to your hand. I've had a quadriplegic boy, and I still can ask him yes, no, and he's nonverbal. I can still ask him yes, no questions and say, blink once for yes, blink twice for no. And they're able to do that. There's other ways we can do that too. But what would we do? Well, frequently you can either do like a potluck, have everyone bring in food, or what I did a lot of times was just like a cookie thing. Everyone would make a bunch of cookies or brownies. We come bring that in, have a social time where we could do that. And then we'd have a game time, an icebreaker and a game time. Well, if I'm doing a talk on nonverbal and doing training with that, guess what game we're playing? Charades. What are we doing? We are teaching them how to communicate without using words. And they don't even realize that, because I haven't even told them what we're doing yet. And then I also have a little devotional I'll do with them. My devotional is usually going to be something with that. I might, I can't even remember right off the top of my head right now. I'm blanking on what I used for that, but I basically used a passage where they weren't able to talk, but yet they were able to get everything out, or maybe even use Moses, who wasn't good with his speech, and he had to have Aaron assist him with that. That's what we need to do for our individuals. And then I would do, the training, give them that update. And everyone came out, had a great time. We had great community, and they learned something important that they could then again apply in coming up. But by doing a game, by doing these other things, you're reinforcing, you're applying, all the techniques you're learning for them. So that's just one example of that. But it's important to train right up front. For me, I personally love having a case-based scenario because I think that really helps get that across. And then you need an ongoing training. So I talked quite a bit there. Does that help, Angela, without going into more specifics with that, or other questions you got?
Yeah, absolutely. You were speaking music to my ears because I have been wanting, I don't know how to do it, but even for school, like with my personal paras or IAs, I have been really, and just for my staff at school too, like this is like speaking big to me because I personally have been trying to get just training on all that's involved in my buildings as well, and along with church. But like I was thinking like real life simulations for them to
Yep.
really experience what's going on, and you are speaking to that. And so I would love to talk. Yeah, we're gonna definitely need to have a consultation.
Yeah. Yeah. So, it's hard to have, I agree fully with you. I'd love to have that real life thing going on. You can't just do that. And you can't really get the videos to work through that. That's hard. It's also not always right and ethical. But if we, just have a picture and talk about it, you get the same effect and describing everything. So, and I cover everything. I'll cover elopement. I'll cover biting. I'll cover, sensory overload, sensory seeking, seizures. I'll cover the nonverbal child. I'll cover transitioning. I'll just a little of everything so that they can be prepared. Because here's the important thing we all have to remember. And I say this repeatedly whenever I do any training. All behavior is a form of communication. 100%. All behavior is a form of communication. Our job as leaders, our job as volunteers is to try to figure out what our individuals are trying to communicate to us. At the same time, I truly believe we need to educate our volunteers on the warning signs that can start leading up to some behavior, because we can prevent bad behavior from occurring by identifying some warning signs. But what does that usually mean? That means our volunteers have to be paying attention. They have to hear what's going on. They have to be interacting with the individual they're working with instead of being on their phone and doing other things. So again, that's where it's really important that we are stressing the importance of what they're doing. One other thing I'm going to really highly suggest, because it's going to really pay off in the long run. Working in disability ministry as a volunteer can be hard work. You never know what the day is going to be like. You might have someone who one of your participants might have a hard day. They might bite you. They might scratch you. They might hit you. Well, being a volunteer, if you're not reminded why you're there and what you're doing, you might think, I'm out. I'm done with this. I don't need this. So as a ministry leader in your ministry, your job is to also be continuing to remind the vision and mission of what you're doing and why you're there. So I'll share how I did this. I had my disability ministry for 8 years. I grew it from 3 individuals to over 800 in a 3-year period of time. I went from 20 volunteers to over 2,500 volunteers in that 8 years. And yes, Angela's asking if anyone's CPI trained or certified. I'm actually a national CPI instructor. And I'm able to help with that. Anyone who's in my network, I can train. And guess what? You all are in my network. And so then it becomes a lot more affordable and can talk through that. CPI training, I highly recommend CPI training more than MANT. Those are the 2 main trainings that are out there. That's high level training to handle any behavior issues that are out there. MANT, I've seen a lot of schools use it, but I've seen a lot of injuries from it for both the participant as well as the staff doing it. And for that reason, I don't like it. CPI is called nonviolent crisis intervention. That one is really safe for both the instructor, for the participant, as well as the staff member. And so that's why I like that one so much. And you don't want everyone trained in that. You only want your staff and high level volunteers with it. But you want to make sure you're going through and have everyone prepared to best do this. So what I like to do again with the class, I ask my volunteers to come in early, about 10 minutes early before the Sunday school to serve. And we'll meet together. I'll real quickly take some prayer requests to see how I can be praying for them, especially if you have youth who are serving. I love finding out when they have an exam that they're stressing about. And then the morning of the exam, I'll text them, hey, Tom, I'm praying for you today. Go knock it out. Guess what? That makes a huge impact on them because they're now no longer just a number. They're no longer just a volunteer. They're now, feel like they're a real person. And so when I'm meeting with them as well, I remind them what the mission and vision is. And so, I attend Grace Church, and our role at Grace Church was that we help everyone become an outward focused follower of Jesus. And then we broke that down. We help all individuals with special needs to be an outward focused follower of Jesus. And so I would remind all of our volunteers every day of that, every Sunday of that, so that when they did get bit, saying, you know what, that might have happened, but we're still helping them learn about Jesus. We're helping them become outward focused followers of Jesus. That's what this is all about. Thank you so much for doing your part with us. And so when we're reminding them that, we're preventing vision leak and helping them prepare to be able to handle whatever might be coming that day. And so that's a big thing as well that can help with it. But it's important to try to then have staff who and that training to help with any de-escalation. You can actually know some de-escalation skills without going through a CPI training or through a MANT training. All right. Other questions, other thoughts out there? Hopefully that's all making sense, what I'm talking through. Or
Yes, definitely. Thank you. This is Rachel. Question, would you be able to give some tips when it comes to nonverbal children? Especially maybe they're not like regular attendees of the church, but every now and again we have parents, who come, and like Pastor Jazz and Liz would say,
yeah,
we want to welcome them. We don't want to let them feel like their kids have to stay with them. This is maybe their one time that they can get maybe 45 minutes to an hour where they get that break, right? So
absolutely.
Yeah. So, just some tips to be able to, recognize or to help in that time, even if they're not going to be with us for maybe a regular attendee.
Yeah, sure. And that's great. Great question. So first, here's one of my really big pet peeves. Never talk in front of someone as if they're not there. And that frequently happens with our friends who are nonverbal. Just because they're not verbal doesn't mean they don't understand, they can't comprehend what you're talking about. Usually they fully understand that, they just can't get the words out. So that's where this training again is so important. We need to train our volunteers that we need to still interact with them and help them. So the other role that we want when we have a child in our ministry who's nonverbal, we want to encourage interaction with other kids. So yeah, I know you said, Rachel, you work in the preschool area. Let's say you've got a couple 4-year-olds there in the room. What usually happens in that case when other kids, especially younger kids, see that someone's not talking, they will go to you as the volunteer and start asking you all the questions. And what happens a lot of times as a volunteer, we start answering for our friend that we're working with. What we need to do instead is tell them, you know what, you can go ahead and ask Johnny that and kind of help them in answering that. And because a lot of times they're going to be yes, no questions. Would you like to play with me? You know, things like that. And then we can teach them. And then you can say yes or no and have them point to your hand. And so it's our job to also educate the other kids in the class on how to welcome them. At the same time, we can help be the voice of our friend and help try to describe what we think they're wanting and seeing. We can also find out if they have other communication devices that they use. You know, do they know sign language? Do they know any, even just basic sign language? Do they have a PEC system or a communication device that they're able to use? Encourage the parents to leave that. A lot of the times the parents won't bring that to church because they're like, oh, they're not going to need it at church. Well, no, they do. Let them have their voice. And so, you know, that's absolutely okay. And they're not hard to use. Most of the time the kid knows how to use it anyways, and you just kind of there to help. And so, you know, our role as the volunteers kind of help encourage. We want any interaction with the peers. And we have to, you know, really be paying attention to them and helping them through that. But we want to try as much as we can to be asking them, you know, yes, no questions that we can help them go through. We also don't want to give a whole list, you know, hey, do you want to do this? Or do you want to do this? Or do you want to do this? That doesn't help. Give them one option at a time and narrow it down from there. But it's highly important that we include them with the others. Frequently, they're still going to want to play. They're still going to want to, you know, they still want to be a friend. That's the whole important thing. And that's what I'm constantly sharing with everyone. We just need to be a friend. Help them be friends. That's what this is all about. So those would be my first steps that I would say. And welcome them. And at the same time, as a volunteer, make sure you're talking to them. So let's say it's Susie. And, you know, I'd say, you know, Susie, I've missed seeing you so much the last few weeks. I'm so happy you're back with us. I've really missed you. She might not say a word, but you know what? Watch her, because her chest might get popped out a little bit, shoulders back, she'll stand a little taller, because you just made her feel like she's been missed and she's important and wanted. Well, that's what we all want deep down. And so it's having things like that that's going to help build these kids up. And then at the same time, we're teaching the classmates how to welcome them. So not just being a volunteer, being a buddy to that individual, we are being a model. We are being a role model to the rest of the kids in the class. And again, we want to encourage any interaction that we can there with that. Does that help? Other questions with that, or anyone else have any ideas or things that they may have done or thoughts they might have?
My son was nonverbal until 4, and I totally agree with you. What I would do is I would model conversation. I would be like, okay, Jay, we're going to go over here, and I would just talk it through. And then if his friends had questions, you know, I totally would do what you were suggesting. So I agree with it, because it is very effective. And then when he was learning sign language for like more and eat and drink and play, I learned that with him, and it really helped him. But I think it's really great what you were saying about the communication device, because sometimes the parents may think, oh, that's only for education purposes. But that was my biggest pet peeve, when people would talk about my son as if he wasn't right there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And my husband, like, my husband's verbal now, but he also was nonverbal till 4. And even though my husband is like in his 40s, people talk about him, you know, when they find out he has autism, like in a very similar fashion. So it's like, I think that, you know, it's kind of like at the conference we went to, Doc, where they were talking about the people that were in the wheelchairs, you know, how people would automatically start talking louder, or you just can be your normal self. And just kind of what I would say to Jay was like, okay, let's go. Okay, Jay, we're going to go to the sink and we're going to go wash our hands. And I would model washing hands. And it was just, I just kept talking to him, even though he couldn't talk back to me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would agree. Like, it was hard when the behavior issues would come because he was frustrated. They couldn't like verbally say what he wanted. So that's a tough situation. But I think with the training, you know, I think anybody could be a good friend to that child and just love up on that child. And that's all they're looking for, is someone to meet them where they're at. And, you know, I think especially with children in preschool age range and K-5 even, you know, like adults talking, like standing up over them sometimes is hard. So I always try to talk to my kids. Now they're taller than me almost, but I try to talk to them at eye level too. But I agree, like that would be my biggest pet peeve. He's laughing over there. You know, like don't talk about my children as if they're right here, that they can hear you.
Right.
And I know that would hurt, like family members would do that too. So yeah, I think that's a great training idea that you have there.
The other important thing that you were saying there too, which again, I totally agree with, is you'll see a lot of times that adults, especially when they realize that a child's nonverbal, they start speaking louder. And so it's just, you know, helping them realize they don't have problems with their hearing. They're having problems with processing where they can't get the words out. And at the same time, when you've got someone who's nonverbal, there's a whole range with that. My son was nonverbal, but he could say 30 words and that. So it's not that they can't ever get word out. They got very few words. So 30 words at the age 5 is not normal. So, you know, what you do then is whenever they do say a word, you praise them. You really encourage that, so you can encourage them to say more often. And when you do know that they can say a word and there's something, you encourage them to say that word with it. And so you are actually helping them. We are not, the thing that I always want to stress is at church, we're not doing education, but we can definitely help them with it. And so real quick with that, the one thing that gets a big mistake that a lot of churches make sometimes is they will go and ask parents for their IEP, and they'll try to have an IEP on hand. If you don't know what an IEP is, it's an individualized education plan that schools have to help meet all the education standards and goals for that child. It's only for the school. It's not for a church. And what I always stress is church is not a place where you're doing all that. We are teaching at church, but we're teaching Jesus. We're teaching the love of Jesus and how, you know, we're all fearfully and wonderfully made, and they're created on purpose and for a purpose in the image and likeness of God. And Jesus sent his one and only son and died for them. That's all we're teaching. We're not teaching them to pass all these other things on their IEP. When churches have asked for the IEPs, parents automatically jump in thinking, oh, you're going to now start helping meet the standards and you're going to follow this and this. So don't even go down that slope. Don't ask for them. Don't look at them. They're really not going to be helping you at all with that. Instead, you know, you can have a plan of care that you fill out. Don't recreate the wheel on that. Email me. I've got a plan of care that I've created. I'll send you an electronic version. You take our name off, you take our logo off, and you put yours on and then edit it how you want. But my plan of care, I've got the names, I got parents' contact information. And then guess what my very first question on my plan of care is? Tell me something special tell me something wonderful about your child. Tell me something wonderful about your child. parents are never asked that question. Well, I'm telling you right now, every child has something wonderful about them. And too many times we get in the rush. Oh, what are all the negative things I need to know? What are their behaviors? What triggers them? Blah, 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 blah. No, tell me something wonderful. And I can't tell you the number of times I've prevented behaviors because I found out what was wonderful about their child and I'm able to use that. And that would have never been written down anywhere. And so I always ask that question when I meet families for the first time, and then I have them fill out the paperwork. And then we also do respites and camps. So we have a lot of medical stuff and food and toiletry. And then I get behavior information and have them fill out everything they need on behavior. What triggers, what don't they like? What do they like? How can you help through all that? And so those are all important things that you add to it as you go through everything. So, that's another important thing to think through as you do everything. Hey, Adam, welcome. I think you're on mute.
Hello.
There you are. Hey, Adam, why don't you take a minute and just introduce yourself to the group here and tell everyone about the amazing group that you work with and some of the amazing stuff you all do.
So my name is Adam Rice. I am from Ballin, Missouri, and I have a group that I started in February of 2019. It is called Good Shepherd Fellowship Forever Abilities Matter. We meet the second Wednesday of the month, and then we have a puppet ministry that meets the fourth Thursday of the month. And we've done several puppet shows on Zoom, which can be found on YouTube as well. If you go to GSFFAM, and if you can also go see those on our Facebook page as well.
Again, that's GSFFAM, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So guys, I highly recommend you go check that out. This puppet ministry is all done by individuals with disabilities. It's fantastic. I've used their puppet stuff for some of our ministry things. I've used it for our camps and everything. It's fantastic. They do a phenomenal job. Adam, I absolutely love what you do. You know, I'm one of your biggest fans, brother. But check it out, see what they're doing. And I bet you're going to be able to use it with some of your stuff. Our individuals, our kids eat it up. They love watching it. And so that's just, especially if you got a lesson that you're teaching, they may have already done that story in puppets. It's a great way to reinforce the lesson in a fun way that they're going to learn. And I love showing all the kids it and then explaining how this was done by, individuals with disabilities, because there's nothing wrong with them. They're able to do these amazing things. So just a cool way and a great resource that they do that's out there, and their team rocks. How many are on your team now? It's fluctuated with COVID.
There's 11 or there's about actually 12 of us now.
Okay. Awesome. Very cool. So again, it's GSFFAM. Go to YouTube, you'll find it. Go to Facebook, they've got their page there too. Adam, we're just kind of talking through some ministry questions. We just got done talking about working with nonverbal child in ministry.
Okay.
What are some things we can work through? I'll throw out to you if you've got any questions or anything you want to talk through tonight. You can go ahead, throw that out. Were there any other questions or any other comments with the nonverbal individuals?
I just had a question embedded into something that you mentioned about educating other children.
Yeah.
what do you recommend on how to, like, I know there's like a book, like I already purchased like a book and like that I could read as like a read aloud to them and things like that. But what would you recommend on educating them? I know you kind of said like examples of like kind of modeling with the child of how to properly do that.
Yeah.
And I actually recently had a scenario about with a nonverbal child, and I kind of said like, he can hear what you're saying, so it's okay, like
Right.
you can talk to him, like, and they were very understanding about it, and it just kind of pulled him to the side and like letting them know. But how do you educate like all children, I guess? Is there like a specific way that you do that?
It's pretty much just one-on-one with all that. However, saying that, I am in the process of writing a children's book to help with that right now. In fact, today was one of the first days I got to spend about an hour working on some of it.
That is so
but
awesome.
SOAR, we have a mascot for SOAR. His name's Bubba Bear. And one of the things that Bubba always says is be a friend. And so Bubba Bear is going to be going around and teaching kids how to be friends, no matter what you look like, no matter what you're able to do, and help do that. So I'm hoping it'll be a whole series of books with that can be used in churches or schools, just to help share that with it, because there's really not a whole lot out there that does that. But other than that, the big thing is just working on just teaching it, like you just said, sharing with that and encouraging the kids to play with them with it. Frequently, these individuals are in their class at school. So it's not a foreign, idea to them, so they're already working with them at school, and that they depending on their age, they may not have any idea why they disappear for an hour or two a day, and that they know they need something different. We're just honest with them, and that's all it is. It's the same thing, if one of our friends needs to have a sensory toy or a fidget toy, well, we don't have to give it to the entire class. That's always the fear. Oh, we have to be fair and equal. What will the other kids say? We're just honest with them. We simply say, hey, you know what, Susie, she needs this fidget toy so that she can stay focused on what we're doing, and it helps her. But you don't need anything like that. So that's why we're doing that. Oh, okay. And they just want the truth. And they know when we're, sending up smoke screens to them. And if we're sitting there and saying, oh, she gets it because she needs, well, that's not going to be a good enough answer for them. But she gets it because, well, now I get one too then. So they just want an honest answer, and they're like, oh, yeah, you know what? Tommy in my class at school has something like that too. Okay, I get that now. The kids are so bright. We don't give them enough credit. And that's one thing we have to always remember, is to give these kids credit. And again, that goes right with, talking in front of them as if they're not there. We can't be talking down to any of these kids. And we got to treat them all with the respect that they're all due with it. But that's got to be part of our heart, is to teach that they can accept and welcome those around them. And, so some of the things I might do too, to get with that more, Angela, is, maybe we're doing a lesson or doing some things, and I would try to partner up. And so I would try to, switch other kids in the class, so we're not always having the same groups. Because frequently, you might be in classes and you always have friends going together. Well, I'll try to break that up so we're with different people, because we need to be friends with everyone. That's what Jesus wants us to do. So I just use that to teach more lessons with that. And again, saying, hey, we can all be friends. That's all it takes. Let's do this. And so that helps with it. Does that help you?
Yes, thank you.
You bet. All right. Anything else with that, or anything else we've talked about so far?
If we're ready to change topic, I do have a question to ask about
Sure.
how to help kids with ADHD.
Yeah, go ahead.
So like, I know my daughter has ADHD. It's hard for her to focus in church. She's 12 years old. And it's like, I wanted to talk to the middle school, high school leader about how to help kids who, and also how we can help kids K through 5 preschool through 5th grade too. I mean, it's usually diagnosed later than preschool, obviously. So, like, I love the fact that you said every behavior is a form of communication. And I feel like sometimes that kids with ADHD, it's like, sit still. And I think the teachers don't understand that maybe they can't just sit still for long periods of time, that getting up might be better for them. Or sometimes, like, if they start doing behaviors that are attention seeking, that's because they're bored. Or I don't really see it as a child misbehaving, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm trying to help, like, the other teachers, you know, because some of us are just old school, like children seen, not heard. And, you know, but I can kind of tell sometimes when a child has ADHD. And so right now we're at the stage where we don't know what children have or don't have, which is okay. But I really want to help them. Like, I know for me, to help me focus at church, I have a fidget toy, the Pop-It, like a Pop-It key ring. And so what I wanted to do was provide something for the students. I mean, for the kids, not students. I'm sorry.
Right.
You know, to have something, because I feel like, you know, they get more bored. And does that make sense? Like, I think it's like, okay,
absolutely.
I'm moving on from this subject. This is old. You know, let's go on to the next new thing. So, you know, I want to keep the kids engaged in class and help the teachers understand that the child's not acting out.
Right. So there's several things you mentioned, and, you know, if anyone else has any comments, I'd love to have you all, you know, jump in too. But several things there, Colleen, that you touched on, I want to make sure we address. First is, this comes back to volunteer training. And again, why I have such strong feelings that we need to train all volunteers, not just our individuals who will be with our individuals with special needs. Because you nailed it on the head. Many of our teachers today are kind of old school, if you would. Okay, now everyone has to be making eye contact all the time to be learning. Everyone has to, crisscross applesauce spoons in the bowl, sit nice and quiet. Well, just not all kids can do that today. And, we've got to learn and ask the question, well, if they're standing and they're being quiet, not causing problems, is it a problem that they stand instead of sit? And so we need to talk through that and realize that. At the same time, we need to allow them to have fidget toys, have, sensory toys with that. Those are very helpful things. A lot of individuals with special needs and disabilities and ADHD, whatever, they actually need this so that their mind will focus and hear. One of my favorite stories I share all the time in my trainings. I had a little guy. He's now 18 years old, so this tells you how long ago this was. But he was in first grade at the time, and little guy with Down syndrome. I love him to death, and his name's Joey. We'll call him Joey. And he was in the class, and the teacher came to me and said, "Doc, we need a new buddy for Joey." I'm like, "Oh, hold on, time out. I've got my best volunteer with Joey." And I'm like, "Well, what's going on?" She goes, "He's not listening. He's not hearing anything." I'm like, "Well, can I come in and just observe next week and see what's going on?" And at the time, we were doing our lesson in the classroom there instead as a group. And she's like, "Sure." So sure enough, I came in the next week. She taught the lesson. All the kids are sitting there, crisscross applesauce, spoon in the bowls, eyes on her. But there's Joey in the back of the room playing with a little car, playing with some toys. And then his buddy, his volunteer, is in the very back of the room not with him, just giving him the independence that he needs, which we train to allow that, because he was doing fine. She finished the lesson, was ready to sit back at the table, and I said, wait, time out. Can I ask a couple questions? She goes, okay. And I go, Miss Sandy, who do you think did the best job listening today? And she pointed out one of the little girls sitting on the front row. I'm like, oh, you're right. Susie, you did a great job listening today. Can you tell me what you learned from Miss Sandy today? And it was wonderful. It was, again, this first grade, it was our, little kindergarten, first grade Sunday school answer. Baby Jesus? I'm like, okay, good. What else? And she stopped and thought a minute, put her finger up to her lips. Be good? I'm like, okay, good. And then I go, hey, Joey, can you tell me what you learned today? And this is what I got from him. Serious, Doc? I'm like, yeah, Joe, tell me what you learned today. He never looked up. He's still playing with his fidget toys and doing all. Never looked up. Okay. Well, Moses went up on top of this really big mountain, and God has the strongest finger of anyone ever in the world, because he used his finger and wrote all the rules we're supposed to obey on this rock. I think that really hurt God's finger. I think God had to have at least 3 or 4 band-aids for his finger after doing that. And then Moses took that rock with all the rules on it and walked back down the mountain, but he saw all the people worshiping this big gold cow. And that made Moses really mad. And he threw the rock down and broke it into a million pieces. I think that made God really mad, because his finger was still hurting and throbbing with all those band-aids. And then Moses, I think, got scared, because he knew he had to go back and tell God what happened. And he was afraid God was going to spank him or put him in time out. And if God's finger was that strong, how strong would God's hand be to spank him? And I'm sitting here trying not to laugh as he's saying all this. And then he goes, and then Moses went back up the mountain, and God found another rock, gave it to Moses, and wrote all the rules all over again with his finger. And I know God's finger, this time he had to maybe have 10 or 20 gazillion band-aids on his finger, because it had to hurt. And I'm pretty sure Moses at least got a timeout for doing that, all that. Well, let me ask you a question. Who heard the lesson? Guess what? That wasn't that week's lesson. That was the last 4 weeks' lessons. And he applied it. He put in what he thought, and he learned from it. Who really learned? And that teacher's eyes were open, because she thought you had to have eye contact, you had to sit quietly, and Joey couldn't hear a thing because he was playing. Joey was the only one in her class who actually heard her stories, because he was able to have something to help his mind focus. And that's where we have to do training to train all of our volunteers. And it's the same way with ADHD. They have to have something to help their mind focus so that they can be able to do all that. And Angela, we'll see you later. Thanks for being a part of this. We'll get with you later. Thanks for coming in, and good luck with everything you're doing. But, God, we need to help these individuals know what to do so that they can handle it, but just so that they can accept everything going on in the room with them, and giving them the skills, and that it's okay to have a sensory toy or a fidget. And that's not going to cause more problems. It's our job to be training volunteers that, and it's going to help a lot. So does that help, Colleen, with some of the things, and maybe some things you can apply then?
Yes, I like that, because I think, like I was telling you, I have a pop-it on a key ring, like a small, and that, like, it's hard for me to focus sometimes, and I'm helping out with the different classrooms, and I'm supposed to help out with the sensory room too. So if it helps me, a 47-year-old woman, I believe it can help my
Absolutely.
kiddos, and I feel like, maybe the training will definitely help open eyes. And I know it's hard to change old habits. Like, so I've been on and off with this church for like 20 years, I think. But, like the way I taught Sunday school in 1997 is completely different in 2023, obviously. So, and the kids have been through a pandemic. There's other things that are affecting them. Maybe it's something at home, or it's just, I don't know, something at school, or you never know. So I think meeting the kids where they're at, instead of looking at the behavior as being disrespectful or bratty, even thinking, okay, they're trying to communicate something. I mean, I know I can't always say exactly what I think. So why do I place that expectation on a child? So, I think that, there are times we need to recognize, like, we want to get the lesson done. We want to focus on our agenda, but sometimes that agenda is just a blueprint. It's not an exact. You don't
Absolutely.
have to get all those bullet points done in the class time. I
Right.
know we have the kids for a good bit of time, but I just want every kid to feel loved and accepted for who they are. That's my
Absolutely.
main objective. And the ministry leaders on board with that too. So I think that's really a great start. So thank you for that information, because I think like we can provide in the classroom fidget toys. And also I found that kids that don't need the sensory headphones or don't need the fidget toys, for the most part, they don't mind seeing another kiddo with it.
Right.
Like, except for like we had these, I don't know what they're called, but in the big group, they had these seating things, and we didn't have enough for the wobble seats, or
Mhm.
not wobble seats, but they're round and they're kind of
Yep.
textured.
Yep. The fidget seat. Yep. I know what
Yeah,
you're talking about.
fidget seat. So we didn't have enough for everybody. That was the only big thing. And I was like, okay, we can just take those and keep those in the sensory room only, But that's where there was some like, I want to sit on it. It's so cool, But yeah, I think that if we can have the training, and I know sometimes churches are like, well, what does it cost, or what time commitment? We don't have enough volunteers anyway for regular. I don't know. We don't. I think at our church we don't want to separate the kiddos. We want the buddy system.
Yep. That's what I always recommend.
Yeah, I think that's where we want to go, because I went to a church where they separated my son and another child. It was a smaller classroom and great volunteers, but I just felt like he has benefited greatly being in a inclusion classroom, I guess, lack of better.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But yeah, I think it's like, I guess getting into the when I introduce myself, kind of like, how do you address the fear that maybe the elders of the church or the minister or even the children's ministry leader might have? Like, it is overwhelming. Like, it could be like,
Right. So let's address a couple of those. They're all great questions. First, point them to us at SOAR. I'd love to talk with them and help. One of my favorite things is I do a whole talk on it, and that's myth busting, how to get senior leadership on board. And I do that talk all over the country on helping senior leadership break all these myths that they have. So first off, it's expensive. No, it's not. It's not expensive. So for instance, the fidget toys, guess what the best fidget toys you can get? They're free. Ask parents to donate Happy Meal toys. 80% of Happy Meal toys are perfect fidget toys. And so you can have parents donate them. They'd love to get them out of their house. They didn't cost you a dime. Other things, I always hear that we don't have enough volunteers. No, it's because you're looking at it wrong. Just about every church I know has the 80-20 rule. 80% of the work's done by 20% of the people. Well, what that tells me is 80% of your church, I'm sorry, they're nothing more than glorified knickknacks sitting in the church seats every Sunday collecting dust and then going home. Those are the people we have to go after. We keep going after the same 20%, And that's why it's frustrating that we can't get new volunteers because they're already volunteering. So we have to find a way to get these other volunteers. How do we do that? Well, let me share with you real quick a way to do that. First off, our role as leaders is to constantly observe people who are around us. And let me give you the 4 most important letters of the alphabet when it comes to volunteer recruitment. It's I-C-N-U. I-C-N-U. And I'll share with you how this works. And Rachel, I'm going to use you as my example, okay? I would come up, and I've been observing Rachel the last few weeks. And I'd come up to Rachel on a Sunday morning. I'd put my hand on Rachel's shoulder and say, hey, good morning, Rachel. Hey, do you have just a minute? Usually it's sure. And then I'd say, you know what, Rachel, I just have to let you know, I've been observing you the last several weeks, and I've got to let you know, I see in you someone who has an amazing heart for people. I see in you someone who's patient and someone who really loves individuals. And I've got a simple question for you. Can you be a friend? Well, I've yet had anyone tell me they can't be a friend. And then I'm like, well, fantastic. That's the only requirement we have for someone to serve in our disability ministry. Now, you don't have to have any experience. We can train you on all of that. Now, I have a huge favor to ask of you. Would you please take the next 2 weeks and just pray and see if God would have you serve in our disability ministry that we're starting up or that we already have going? And maybe in 2 weeks, we can sit down, grab a cup of coffee, and talk through that. Would that be okay? Guess what else? I've never had anyone tell me, especially as a pastor or a ministry leader at church, no, I'm not going to pray. When I do that, and I've done this now for 15 years, I have a 90 to 95% success rate at getting those volunteers. Why? What did I do? I made a personal connection. I literally went and tapped a shoulder. I put my hand on the shoulder, said, hey, Rachel, I see in you this, this, and this, and that will fit perfect in our ministry. I asked if you can be a friend. Fantastic. That's the only requirement we have. You don't need to know anything else. And here's the trick. Did you hear me ask her to serve? No. What did I ask her to do? I asked her to pray. I let God do all my heavy lifting. Why do I need to do it? Let Jesus do your heavy work, and God will convict their heart. I can't tell you the number of people who have told me, you know what, Doc, when you were talking to me, I was sitting there ready to tell you no, but you said pray. You didn't say serve. And so I said I would pray. And so I did. And I've even had some people tell me I didn't pray because I knew I wasn't going to do it. But then God just has made my week horrible and has been convicting me. And until I knew he's saying, I've got to do this. I didn't ever tell them they had to do this. I never told them they had to, serve. And they come back then and say, I'm in. Those are the volunteers you're going to get. And then after you get that yes, you find out what they're passionate about and then try to match passions with their area of ministry, and you've got them for life. But you're going after that 80%, all those knickknacks who aren't doing anything, who are coming to pick up the kids on the weekend anyways, doing the other things. We're constantly, as ministry leaders, always going after the 20% that we're always seeing and we know. We need to go after that other 80%. And that is how you make a difference. And that's how I went from 20 volunteers to 2,500 volunteers in 8 years. It works very, very well. So do that and tell any senior pastor that, and I promise you, things will change. And people just don't do that. And we think we have to, if I could just make an announcement from the pulpit, or if I could do, have an announcement in the bulletin. That's not always going to do it. Definitely the bulletins do nothing. If you announce from the pulpit, you have to have someone who's passionate and really saying things. So even when I make an announcement for the pulpit, I'm not the one making the full announcement. I want a video about a family with special needs sharing how important it is to come to church and that. and sharing the real life struggles with it. You know, that mom wakes up on Sunday morning and gets Johnny ready to come to church. Johnny's 9 years old with autism. Well, then she gets ready and comes back down, and oh, Johnny's naked. She has to get Johnny dressed again. And then she goes and wakes up the other kids and gets them ready, and then comes back down. Johnny's naked again. She has to dress Johnny all over again. And then mom goes and makes breakfast and comes back. Johnny's naked a third time and dresses him again. Finally, mom goes upstairs to finish getting ready, make sure dad's ready. They come down, ready to go out the door. They're already late. Johnny's naked a fourth time, and she has to dress him again. Sharing a story like that, people are like, what do you mean you have to dress him 4 times? He's 9 years old. He should be dressing himself. That's the life of a family with a disability. And you need to, and then being able to come to a church that will welcome him for who he is and love on him and teach him the love of Jesus is huge. So when I get up to make an announcement to the church, I start off by saying, hey, good morning. We are so glad to have you. Yeah, I'll use Rachel again. We're so glad to have you here today at Church of Revelation. Welcome. What a wonderful, glorious morning this is. Now, I've got a quick question for all of you. Raise your hand if you can be a friend. The entire congregation raises their hand. I'm like, fantastic. Each and every one of you now just met the only requirement to serve in our new disability ministry. Did you know only 11% of churches in the United States welcome families with disabilities? 89% turn families away and say they're not welcome. Well, I'm telling you today, Church of the Revelation is going to be one of those 11% that welcomes families, and it's vital. At the same time, 90% of families with disabilities don't attend church. So we're going to be a beacon of light in our community and welcome our families. Now take a minute and hear how important it is for this family. Then you play the 1-minute video with them sharing how important it is to come. And then I follow back up and saying, now, all we need is you. You don't need the experience. You've already said you can be a friend. Come and transform the lives, and let's welcome these families and share the love of Jesus with them. Guess what happens? I have a lot of volunteers come because I shared a story, I made it passionate, and I shared a need. People will volunteer if they know what the need is. They're not going to volunteer just because there's other jobs there. But if they hear, holy cow, only really 11% of churches are doing this, 89% turn families away, that's not right. I'm going to be a part of this. They're going to get there. When they hear, hey, we're going to witness to 90% of our community who's unchurched. Well, you know what? That might be what it takes for the Holy Spirit to light them on fire, to get them to start volunteering. And so that's how we can start getting volunteers and completely blow this myth out that you don't get volunteers. I've seen churches do this and do this well, where they flipped it. 80% of the church is volunteering, 20% doesn't. It happens. So I just went a bit long on that, but questions with that or anything on getting volunteers or some of that myth busting, or any other points you guys have?
We definitely have to talk to Pastor Giles about that. Well, she was in your training before, but we need more volunteers, because our numbers are starting to go up for the children's, for our age group, and I think it's all across. So we definitely need more, so we can spread out the kids, because we had brought them in one classroom. So we definitely could use some of those methods that you're talking about, because we need more people.
Every church can.
Yeah.
And here's one other thing you need to always remember. Whether you're in disability ministry, children's ministry, student ministry, it doesn't matter what ministry you're in. You will never have enough volunteers, ever. That's a lie we always tell ourselves. Well, if I could only get 5 more volunteers. No, you're always going to need to be recruiting more volunteers. Always. And so just know that. And so if you're just in the mindset to constantly be volunteering, constantly be passionate about it and sharing with others how they can do it, why they need to do it, you're going to get those volunteers. Was it always easy for me? No, it was a struggle. Yes, I went from, 20 to 2,500 volunteers, that takes a lot of work. And it's not just on me. My volunteers ended up recruiting their friends as well, because we were also doing volunteer appreciation and other things where they all of a sudden did not feel like they were a number. They felt like they were really loved on and cared for. So like once a month, I found someone who was passionate about encouragement. Well, I'm like, well, how would you like to be my volunteer encouragement coordinator? I'll give you a small budget, and every weekend, every once a month, you put together something for our volunteers, letting them know we appreciate them. So the very first Sunday, I'm never going to forget it. The very first weekend, we had 5 services every weekend, 2 on Saturday, 3 on Sunday at the time. She made a little Ziploc baggie, put a little graham cracker in it, a marshmallow, and a small Hershey bar. And then wrote on the bag, put a little a note on the bag that was all cut out, looked nice, and said, "We need more volunteers like you." Guess what? That cost me 8 cents to make. Our volunteers literally ate it up. They loved it. It helped them recruit other people. And guess what happened? I had volunteers from other ministries come. I had people who never served who came and started serving in my ministry. Why? Because all of a sudden they felt like they were appreciated. A lot of that 80% of people don't want to serve because they've been hurt before, or they've tried to do something and people didn't listen to them. They were treated like a number. They had to cancel because they were on vacation, and then they were pressured and felt bad because they had to, because that if someone ever has to cancel, you thank them for it. You let them know how much you appreciate them and thank you. Hope we'll see you next time you're on the schedule. Those little things make differences, and it's all about treating others as a family. And it goes back again. We need to treat everyone how we want to be treated and really stick to that. All
I
right.
like the volunteer appreciation. That's really a good idea. That's some more ideas. Really cool.
It makes a big difference. It really does. And you can now find all kinds of things on Pinterest. She did this for me now about 10, 11 years ago. All of her stuff went to Pinterest, and everyone's copied and done things from it. We also she would also do like put in a couple, 2 or 3 starbursts in a bag, and it would say something like, "You're the star of this ministry, and we're bursting because of you." And I love corny puns, so that's perfect for me. But people ate it up, and it was amazing. All right. Any other issues we can be talking through or work through?
Would we be able to give maybe something about, I've had experience with kids where one particular child where he was a biter. And we didn't know, because it's not like, the parent told us. So it was just us, when we're trying to, for him coming into class and trying to help him. And then he just started, where it's like, ooh, so yeah.
Yeah. So, and what with the iPad with him? Does he like the iPad? Does that help him?
Well, we don't really have any iPads for our classrooms.
Oh, okay. All right.
So.
All right. I thought you were asking about iPad. Okay. So, first, let's talk about a biter. If you've got someone who's a biter, most of the time, the reason for that is they are sensory seeking. They're not getting enough input to them, sensory input. And so they are needing more stimulation. And so there are several different things that you can do and talk about. First, if they're, I would talk to the family, because if they're biting all the time at home, at church, and they may be chewing a shirt, they might be biting toys, other things, they're doing it at home as well. And so most of the time, these parents already have something at home that's called jewelry. They're little toys, and it's like jewelry that they can chew on, and it's specially made for that. And you just ask the parents, hey, by chance, does Susie have a piece of jewelry, or Johnny have a piece of jewelry or a bite toy that they have? Oh yeah, he does. Well, could you have them wear that every week so that he can have that if he needs it? Or send it in a Ziploc baggie, have his name on the baggie, and then his buddy will have it, so when he needs it, he can get that. That can really help with it, because a lot of times they're just needing that input, and parents don't even think, again, they don't think about sending that to church. They send it to school all the time, but a lot of times they think, oh, church, it's just an hour, hour and a half, they'll be fine. Well, they need it just as much. Other things you can try to do is, find other things to help them that will give them that sensory input. So finding some vibrating sensory toys that are large enough that won't go in the mouth. Weighted blankets can help. Giving them snacks to chew on and eat can be helpful with that. Simple reminders for them sometimes. Hey, what goes in your mouth? Soft hands, things like that can help them as well sometimes. But talking through all of that will really help them as you go through that, and will prevent the biting from continuing. It's not going to stop all biting. There may be others there, but it can really help prevent a lot of it. And then, trying to find things that will help keep them stimulated and help keep them going, to prevent them from getting bored. A lot of times when they're getting bored, that's going to be causing some other things. So again, having some fidget toys, some other sensory toys that they can have. You just want to make sure they might be big enough that they won't be biting on, chewing them. But if they're able to be squeezing and playing things, that's giving them that input, sensory input that they need to have with it. But most of the time it's because they're needing more input into their body, and they're just not getting enough. So they're going elsewhere to find it. Sometimes biting can be because they're upset or angry. And this is really common if you got a child who's nonverbal. They don't know how to say that they're upset or angry or that they want something. And so they just do the only thing that they know, and that's lash out and bite. So again, it's trying to learn the child, know them, try to see what triggers might be going on, see how they're acting, what's going on. Because again, that's behavior that they're trying to communicate with you. So why are they biting? Are they biting because they need more sensory input? Are they biting because they're upset about something? Are they biting because they're hungry? There can be all kinds of things. So we've got to put on our detective hat and be a detective and try and figure out, okay, what is the actual cause here that's doing all this for us? Does that help you? All right.
Definitely. Thank you.
You bet. Other questions along that, or anyone else have any other input for a biter?
I think those are perfect ideas, especially the chewy jewelry. It's a great. I had to. My son had to have one for a while. He wasn't a biter. It's just it helped him focus, I guess you could say. But I never thought about it's a form of communication, really, that the child's trying to express. So that totally makes sense. So
right. Now, one other thing. Let's continue talking about the biting. Let's talk about the volunteer who got bit. How do you respond to the volunteer who got bit? So I'll share how I responded to it. I can't tell you, especially if they're like a student, a middle school, high school student. If they come up to me and, Doc, I just got bit, and they might be crying, they're all upset about it. Here's my response. Congratulations, you're part of the bite club. Welcome to the club. Well, guess what happened? They're now have this badge of courage. They're like, oh, okay. And most of the time that stops the crying. They're like, oh, I in fact know one church that gives out a button that they can have that says bike club on it. I don't think I would do that, but that's fine. But what happens a lot of times is, oh, sweetie, I'm so sorry. Well, we're just helping them feel bad about it. And, then next thing you know, they're going, I'm out of here. I'm not doing this. Where, when we're reminding them, and then what I usually say with that is, way to stay with it and way to help share Jesus with them. I'm helping remind them what they were there for. And so even though they had that bite or that hit, they helped share Jesus today with the individual they're working with. And that's what it's all about. And so they took one for the team. They took one for God's team today. They're going to be rewarded. And it's not a big, terrible, horrible thing. Most of the time, the vast majority of bites don't break skin. So just tell them, let's just go in the bathroom and wash it up, soap and water, you'll be fine. Now, if it did break skin, that's going to be a little different. We need to, again, make sure we clean it with soap and water, but they are going to have to see a doctor because they're probably going to need some antibiotics for that, because here's my medical background. Guess what the dirtiest bite on the face of the earth is? A human bite. So if a human bite breaks skin, and you don't treat it, it's going to be infected. So that's why you have to make sure you clean it out, and you may end up getting some antibiotics for that. But it's important how we react to our volunteers on everything. At the same time, it's important how we react to our individuals that we're working with. Going back to what Colleen talked about trying to get down on their level when we talk to them, remaining calm, because our behavior will actually affect our individual's behavior. And so if we get all excited with that, we're going to raise their excitement level and their anxiety. And so if we can remain calm, we can talk calm, we get on their level, it's going to be a lot more calming and help them relax. All right, well, we're coming up on the end of our time here together. We're doing a lot of talking. Any other questions we want to talk through here with our remaining few minutes we got?
How do you encourage a child who doesn't want to come to class?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Trying to find things that they're going to want to do, welcome them, be encouraging to them. That's again where, I find, what's something wonderful about them. One of the parents told me that they love to color and draw, and they're a great artist. So I'm like, hey, Johnny, I've got some amazing crayons and markers in the room. Can you come and draw me a pretty cool picture? Well, yeah, all of a sudden they're going to do that. You can also try to talk about working towards a reward, where, something that they really like. Maybe, you got a couple of you talked about creating a sensory room. Maybe they want to spend time in a sensory room, or maybe they like to listen to music. So you just, give them 5 minutes to listen to music on a phone or an iPad, or play a game, whatever it might be that they like. They can work towards that. And so they get a star every time they do something you wanting them to do. You never take a star away. You don't give stars for bad behavior. You just give it for the good. And then once they get all 5 stars, they get whatever you're working towards that you've agreed on. But you never take them. They can't get that reward to get out of the lesson. You want them to hear the Bible story. But they can get out of craft. They can get out of snacks. They can get out of playtime. We just can't take them out of the Bible story with it. But those would be some of the things I'd be working on. Talk with the parents as well. See, try to see what's causing it. Talk with the teachers in the room. Others, has something happened previously that they don't want to come back in? Maybe someone bullied them in a previous week. Maybe they got hit. Something happened. So we got to try to figure that out and talk through that. So again, it goes back to us trying to be investigative to see how we can help level that playing field, because we want them in there. with it and let them have a good time. And we can also say, sometimes to help them in, hey, Susie, I really need a special helper today. Do you think you could be my right hand gal today and help me with some things? And like, I would usually carry a clipboard. I said, first thing, do you think you could just help me by carrying my clipboard and walk around with me? Well, lots of they're like, oh, okay, yeah, that's pretty cool. So just by being a helper and that kind of elevates them over the other kids, something that the other kids don't get to do. They're like, okay, yeah, I'll do that. So we can try to think out of the box sometimes for that. Anyone else have any other ideas?
We have a member who isn't interested in puppets, and so I offered to him, hey, how about you help with the backstage stuff? Curtains, that kind of stuff. He was very interested in that. We've had new members come in, and I've said, how about you sit in on one of the meetings? If you're interested, you're more than welcome to come back. If you're not, we're totally fine with that as well. We were happy to have you.
Yeah. So it's just trying to find things that they might be interested in. And remember, we can't do a one size fits all for everybody. Everybody's a little different. That's what makes us all unique and individuals. And many times in a church setting, we tend to forget that, and we kind of start thinking, oh, everyone has to be treated the same way and be the same. We don't. Everyone's unique, and we have to figure out, what's right for each person. Trying to get to the same end goal, but it might be a different road that we have to take to get to that goal.
Those are very helpful tips. Thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Any other thoughts or questions tonight? All right. Well, we are coming up on our time. I'll give everyone an extra 10 minutes of their night. I know Rachel, our friend on the East Coast, it's getting a little later there for you. So thank you for hanging with us here tonight. And actually, Colleen, you're an East Coaster as well. Both of you.
Yep, in Georgia.
Yeah, both of you
Yeah.
are getting a little late. So
Thank you so much, Doc. I
oh,
have a lot of
absolutely. And again,
here.
we're here to help you all out with anything.
Yeah.
Next month, we are not going to meet because it lands on the same day. I'm doing a 3-hour intensive on Disability Ministry 101 for Disability in the Church conference in Cleveland, Ohio. So I won't be able to do our meeting, but I'll be at that conference. If any of you are at the conference, make sure you find me. I'll do one of the TED Talks. I'll do the talk on ICNU. You just kind of got the quick part of it, the semi TED Talk here today. And then I'll be doing, like I said, a 3-hour intensive on Disability Ministry 101, everything you need to know. If you are in the Cleveland, Ohio area, or able to go to Cleveland last week of April, it's going to be a great conference. We have a lot of great speakers who are going to be there. I'm excited about that. So check that out. You can see things on our Facebook page for it, or you can go to Key Ministry, who is actually hosting the conference. Again, that's keyministry.org, and you can see about registering for that. But you got any questions on how to do disability ministry or how to start a disability ministry, come check out my intensive on Disability Ministry 101. I'll be giving you everything you need to know through a fire hose in about 3 hours on everything you need to do. So we will come back together then in May, and we'll be again in the evening from 6:30 to 8:30 Central Standard Time on the 4th Thursday. I don't have the calendar. I do have a calendar. Let me find the date. So that will be May the 25th. Will be when we meet together again. May 25th. And
good.
we'll have a good time with that then. All right.
All right. Hopefully, I know the conference is going to go well.
Yes,
So all the best.
it'll be good. It'll be good.
I'll keep you in prayers for that. I know you're going
Thank you so much.
do
Thank you.
amazing.
All right, guys. Well, let
All
me
right.
just close us in prayer and then we'll
All right.
get on for our evening. Dear God, I just thank you so much for this day. I thank you for everyone here and just for those that weren't able to make it tonight, just to help all of us in welcoming families with disabilities into our churches. Give us wisdom, give us faith, give us courage as we talk to our senior leadership to do this. Help us as we try to recruit volunteers and create training programs. Just help us to follow your will in welcoming these families and treating the way you want them to be treated. And God, we thank you for this day now, and just give us all a good night of sleep. We pray this in your great and holy name. Amen.
Amen.
All right, guys, good seeing you all. You have a blessed day and week. We'll talk to you next time.
Good. Thank you. Bye, everyone.
All right.
Thank you.
God bless.
God bless. Bye-bye.